child, I had a collection that I prized very, very highly. Did anyone here have a collection? Maybe you still have a collection. Did anyone collect things? Some people collect dolls. Some people collect those precious moments figurines. Some people collect baseball cards. Some people collect cars, it seems like. But when I was a kid, I collected acorns. I know that's weird, but yes, I did. Acorns. The bigger and shinier and smoother I could find, the happier I was. And I'd always knock off that little wooden tree hat that they wear. I don't want that part. Just the acorn itself. And I had an entire desk drawer stuffed full, crammed full of acorns. And when the time came for us to move and we had to pack everything up, my parents were going through drawers and things, and they found my collection, my treasured collection of acorns. And they said, "Matt, why do you have all of these?" And I had no answer. I like them. They make me happy. They shine and they're smooth, and I like them. And I had no real answer, and I'm sorry to say my acorn collection didn't make the move. Because I couldn't give any good reason why I had them. And that's what we need to be thinking about today. Whatever it is we collect, whatever it is we love, why? Why do we surround ourselves with so many things, and why are we so obsessed with getting more of them? What is it? What is it about us that makes us want to collect stuff, surround ourselves with stuff, and why does that stuff give us comfort? We're looking at James chapter 5, starting another chapter of James today. If you would turn there with me. We're just looking at verses 1 through 6, just a few verses today. Give you a moment to turn there. This is James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. James writes, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts, and you have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you." James is again writing a very heavy, rebuking passage, and he talks immediately about the wealthy, about the rich. It's likely James is addressing wealthy landowners in the part of the world called Galilee. It's likely he's writing about those who have some stuff, the wealthy landowners who by bullying, by sneakiness, by fraud, by duplicity, have collected, stored up a bunch of the property, the land and the wealth that is in the area of Galilee. This is wealth that is built on the suffering of innocent people. In fact, possibly even on righteous people. And we might already be thinking about distancing ourselves as readers from this passage. You might crack it open, see who James is writing to, and say, "I'm not rich. I'm not rich. I'm one of the poor oppressed. I'm one of the innocent oppressed. I'm not rich." James isn't addressing me here. This is a rebuke for those other people. This is a rebuke for somebody else. We might try to paint ourselves as the innocent here, but we need to make sure before we dismiss James' writing and say, "Let's skip on to the next part." Matt, you're done with this sermon. You can just move on to the next part of James. Before we do that, let's make sure we're searching our hearts and carefully studying this passage to make sure that there aren't areas we need to hear, parts of our lives that we need to change. One of the first ways to do that is start off by seeing that anyone who has anything has something. Whether it's a closet full of clothes or a drawer full of acorns, if you have anything, you have something. And move from that logically and see, if you have something, then you are very capable of trying to get more of that something. And if you've gotten that far, whether again it's clothes, cars, acorns, money, whatever, see that you're capable of trying to get more, then see that you're capable of trying to get more of that thing, that something, at the expense of somebody else. You are capable of wanting more of something, and you are very capable of trying to get it at the expense of some other person. I can remember, you may be able to remember this far back, maybe not, maybe it was just the other day for you. I remember the first time I got a $20 bill. $20 bill as a kid. I remember the first time I got it, a $20 bill, and that was wealth beyond my wildest dreams. $20 was an enormous amount of money to me. As I got a little older, it became $100. That was more money than I could ever imagine anyone having. But when I got 20 of my own, ooh boy, did I start making plans with that $20 bill. Back then there was a place called Toys R Us that would sell lots of wonderful things, and I had plans. I was making a checklist in my head of all the Toys R Us items I was going to purchase with that 20. But I didn't get to go to Toys R Us right away. I didn't get there very fast. And pretty quickly, a candy bar here, a pack of baseball cards there, that 20 disappeared. I didn't have that money anymore. In fact, that is still true. If you've got a $20 bill, as soon as you break it, it's gone. It just miraculously disappears, it seems like. You get nickel and dimed until that $20 is gone. And that's where James is trying to rattle our cage first. Our first main point here is the comfort of money does not last. The comfort of stuff does not last. The comfort of acorns does not last. James begins with these words, "Come now." It's a way of saying, listen up. Now listen. Pay attention. Yeah, we were talking other stuff, but now focus up and hear what I'm saying. Pay attention instead of what you were previously doing. James says, pause if you can, pause for a moment from your acorn collecting and listen to what I'm saying. Pause from your comfort seeking, because James says, comfort seeking, you wealthy, must turn to weeping and howling. It's time for you to weep and howl, to cry and make awful noises. Turn to sadness instead of fun when you think about collecting, when you think about acquiring comforts. James says, because miseries are coming. Misery is on its way. Sadness is coming. Just like from our call to worship from Hosea, this is also borrowing Amos language here. It's Old Testament prophet language describing the day of the Lord. You may have heard it called the day of judgment. That this is going to end, and we're going to be called to judgment. This day of the Lord, when everything that pleases God is going to be upheld and be made perfect, and everything that disappoints God is going to be removed. It's going to be wiped away. So in order to learn from James' rebuke of the wealthy, the next thing we have to do is accept that all this is going to end. We have to accept that this ball is not going to keep spinning in space forever. Whether or not we live long enough to see it or not, I don't know. But all this is going to end, and we need to remember that. We need to pay attention to that fact. We believe today that there is going to be a day of judgment. And your behavior is going to be judged based on God's standards. You have to believe people will be judged, and not just the richest jerks in Rome. James says, you middle-class jerks in Galilee too. Not just them, not just the worst bullies, but all those who've ever collected comfort at somebody else's expense. Not just other people, but you will be judged. So if we can accept that, get to that mental place, that all that is true, that this is going to end, and that God cares what we have done with it, if we can accept all of that, then we have to ask, how are we going to stand up under that judgment? What will my collection look like? How will I be addressed by God when I stand before Him in that judgment? Verses 2 through 3, James continues with this idea. And he makes it very clear that you're not going to be judged on your stuff. You're not going to be judged on how big your collection is. That's not what God's looking for. And he gives us a list of collected stuff. He gives us a list of collected comforts, doesn't he? He says riches. To me, that just makes me think of stuff. You know, whatever's in your house, your decorations, your silverware, your television, your DVDs, whatever it is, your stuff. He says, that's not going to make it. Then he says garments. Your garments are going to be eaten up by moths. And I haven't counted them lately, but I would be willing to wager I have at least 50 bow ties. At least 50 bow ties. I know I have 6 pairs of shoes. Some of you may have more. I doubt anyone here has more bow ties than me. But you may have more pairs of shoes than that. We collect these things, and he goes further than that just in case we miss it. He says gold and silver also. What was gold and silver in James' day? That's money. That's those precious metals that they could use to buy what they wanted. And he says that gold, that money, is one of those collected comforts. I'm going to let you in on a secret of the insurance business. I used to be it wasn't really door-to-door, but that's really what it turned into, a door-to-door insurance salesman. And there was a secret. You always knew you had a good chance of selling a house. It's not quite a sure thing, but you knew you had a great chance if, as you approached the front door, you noticed they had a lot of lawn ornaments. If they had a bunch of gnomes or those things that that spin in the wind, or got a bunch of wind chimes or whatever, that was a good sign, because that means these people are comfortable spending money on stuff. And then if you go into the house and you could look, and if they have a wall of those, that $1 or $5 DVD bin at Walmart, if they have a bunch of those, if they had a bunch of $5 DVDs, you'd know that they were comfortable with impulse buying. You walk by the bin and say, oh, look, a copy of Taxi. That's got Jimmy Fallon, I'll take it. It's only $5, and you knew they were comfortable letting go of that money. And you say, well, they're probably going to be comfortable giving me some money for some insurance today as well. They're comfortable with paying, and they're comfortable with collecting. And James uses this list, riches, garments, gold, to let us know that acorns or shoes, whatever it is, we're comfortable with collecting. That's what we do. And James calls this compulsion, this being comfortable with collecting, he calls it laying up treasure in the last days. What does he mean by last days? This was 2,000 years ago. There have been more days since James wrote this. What does he mean? The last days is what James is calling the time between then and the day of the Lord. The time between then and when Christ returned. And that day of the Lord, the end of this world, the return of Jesus Christ, the time between now and then is every second getting shorter and shorter. We're getting closer and closer. James was already expecting it in the first century, expecting Christ's return. And here we are in the 21st century, so we must be much closer than James was. We're even closer now. And whether it was then or now, James says we're using our last moments to pile up as many acorns as possible. We're using our last moments to fill our house with $5 DVDs. But read here, though, that collections are false comforts. What does he say? He says, your riches have rotted. Your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded. And if you're a natural science chemistry expert, you might want to give a pushback here. A geologist, I don't know what you call it. You might want to give a pushback to James and say, actually pure gold doesn't rust. There's nothing in the natural elements that will corrode pure gold. So maybe James didn't really get his analogy right. See here, though, that the natural law is not what James is talking about. That's not the subject here. He's not talking about the natural law of gold. He's talking about what you naturally want. He's saying that what you naturally want can harm you. What your heart tells you is a great, wonderful comfort. Oh, look, now I have a copy of that movie. Doesn't that make me so happy? Oh, look, my fridge is stuffed full of food. Isn't this grand? Whatever gives you comfort is wasting away. So he says, wasting away. I made myself delicious grilled cheeses last night, and I had to open the packet of the cheddar cheese slices and make sure, it had been a while since I made anything with that cheese, that it hadn't gone moldy on the edges. Because it'll do it in a fridge if you're not careful. And the more natural the product, it seems like the faster it wears out. Why does whole wheat bread mold faster than white bread? Why? The natural world is wearing out. That's what James says here. What you're looking for comfort is not going to last. Don't even get me started on how quickly obsolete electronics become. These things are going to waste away. And James says what your heart tells you is comforting is not going to last. And we need to hear the connection with our offertory scripture. From Matthew 6, Jesus said, lay up treasure in heaven, where stuff doesn't corrode, where it doesn't waste away, where the moth doesn't come and eat, where things don't wear out. That's where we need to be looking. James is connecting to that idea and wants us to look at our corroded collection and ask, what is this really worth? Is this going to get me into heaven? Will I stand before God the Father and say, please let me into heaven because I have a bunch of DVDs? Is that what we're supposed to say? James actually answers that. And says that's a really bad thing to take with you before God. He says that your collection is actually evidence against you. Those are facts in the courtroom of judgment that make you look really bad. He says that's evidence against you. It's evidence that you worship your own comfort instead of God. And with all that evidence, think about all the stuff in your house. With all that evidence stacked up against you, he says you cannot stand before God in judgment. You can't stand up in judgment and say, let me in, God, because I have a lot of stuff. And James makes it even worse. He says the corroding, your collection's corrosion is going to spread to your heart. It's going to spread to your heart. It's amazing what stuff can do to you. You get a few things and you want more things. You get a little money and you want more money. The corrosion of your things, the desire for it never stops. You never feel like you have enough. And he says that corrosion spreads to your heart and continues. And he wants us to understand, please, that chasing comfort is going to eat you up. Chasing stuff will eat you up because you're never done collecting. It's going to eat you up until there's nothing of you, none of you left, that's going to be able to stand up under God's scrutiny. When I was 8 years old, we were living in Dalton, Georgia, and I'm not going to tell you the guy's name, but there was a young guy there at this church who was really quiet, really slow-moving, wasn't good at sports, didn't seem overly bright, and he became the target of bullying. He was the target of abuse because he was quiet, because he was slow-moving. Kids found it very easy to pick on him. And I'm ashamed to say that on one occasion, and only one, on one occasion, I joined in the bullying of this kid. And it made me feel strong. It made me feel cool. It made me feel great to know that I was better than this kid. To this day, when I think of bullying that kid, 8-year-old bully Matt makes me sick thinking of him. Because this kid would never fight back. All he would say is, oh, come on, guys. Come on, guys. Just leave me alone. Come on, guys. And it makes me sick to think about it. And that's our second point here. James wants us to see that it is easy to bully well-behaved people. It is easy to pick on people who don't fight back. That's our second point. It is easy to bully well-behaved people. Do bullies lay up treasure in heaven? No. James writes they are living on earth now. They're not thinking of heaven. They're on earth now, living in luxury and selfish indulgence. Comfort-oriented people. Just this very morning, Sarah and I were talking about adding comfort to our lives. We already have DirecTV. We have Amazon Prime, so we can watch the stuff on there. We have Netflix, so we can watch the stuff on there. And really the problem is the stuff we want to watch isn't always on any of those three. So we were talking about adding Hulu to that list to make sure that we have something to watch. Make sure that we have more comfort. It's so easy to insulate yourself, to become immune to the suffering of other people if you've got your comforts around you. If you have your comfort collection, if you have people you care about near you, if you have stuff you like near you. It's easy to become immune to somebody else's suffering. It can be hard to even relate to other people. James says that those who are bullies, who are collecting comfort at the expense of other people, who have lost the ability to relate to those who are picked on, they've fattened their hearts on a day of slaughter. It's likely this is actually a cow analogy. That this is talking about cows. What do cows do? They roam around and eat grass, and then when they weigh enough, they get turned into hamburger. And James is saying that's what bullies are doing. They're roaming around, eating up everything they can, making their hearts as fat as possible, ignoring the suffering of others, without knowing that any second they're going to die and stand before God in judgment. This cow analogy here. James says, don't go day to day eating grass. Don't go day to day collecting comforts. Because God is not basing your salvation, your surviving judgment, on how comfortable you've made yourself. Comfort's not going to stand. And neither will bullying. Because so often that's how collections happen. Those who collect comfort at the expense of other people. Verse 6, James says, you have condemned and murdered a righteous person, you wealthy. In building your collection, you've condemned and murdered the righteous person. Now, it's likely that, very possible, we're getting a Greek double meaning here, this righteous person phrase. If you look at it in the original language, it's likely we're getting a double meaning. Righteous is very likely to mean one of God's people. And remember, the primary target of who James is writing to is the church. This Galilean church. He's writing to church people. He's talking to wealthy landowners, yes, but we have to ask, do these abuses, does bullying exist in the church? There are lots of congregation disagreements over all sorts of different things, particularly money and property, and who decides how to use them. And here's where the bullies step in. So often, it's the least sensitive people who get their way. But we say it in a different way. We try to make it sound nice. The toughest people get their way. So often, the toughest person gets their way, leaving a trail of shattered feelings behind them. But remember, there's a double meaning. Righteous person can also mean someone who is innocent. And we're not talking about eternal salvation innocence. We're talking about innocence as in do not deserve your abuse. Because they are not the cause of your discomfort. That kid I picked on when I was 8 years old was not the reason I felt insecure about myself. He did not deserve that abuse. It wasn't his fault I wasn't cool. He didn't deserve that abuse. And often we target people to make ourselves feel look better or have more stuff who don't deserve that abuse. Someone who doesn't deserve to be a target. Realize today that it is wrong to collect comfort or wealth at somebody else's expense. You have to let go of money. You have to let go of comfort. Let go of power instead of stepping on people to get to those things. You have to let go of them. Understand that abusing people to get your own comfort doesn't stand up on that day of judgment. It doesn't stand up. In fact, it's a false victory. James ends with this little clause here, this little phrase. He says, the righteous do not resist. It's a hollow victory because the righteous do not exist. In Matthew 5, Jesus says the same thing. The righteous person does not avenge himself. Don't think because you're the least sensitive or the toughest person, God is going to give you a pass in judgment. Because it's no accomplishment to bully someone who won't fight back. And that leads us to our last point today. We have to find comfort without collecting and without bullying. It's our third point. We have to find comfort without collecting and without bullying. Stuff doesn't stand under judgment. Bullying doesn't stand under judgment. God doesn't hear the rustle of your full wallet or the flexing of your bully muscles. That's not what God is listening for. In verse 4, James tells us what God is listening for. He hears these wealthy landowners cheating wages, how they don't pay people enough, how they don't take care of people the way they ought to be taken care of. He hears those crying out against them. Landowners not paying a fair wage. And again, it makes us ask, what sneakiness, what sneaky extent, how far will we go to get personal comfort? What's our limit? Who will we hurt? Who will we lie to? Who will we deceive in order to get what we want? We recently purchased a new, you may have seen them, the new white folding chairs that are in the education building. We got them at Sam's Club, and we had prearranged that. We pre-purchased them to make sure they'd be there ready for us to pick up. We needed 60. We wanted 60 chairs to replace the old ones with the new ones. And we got there, they had them all boxed up, already prepaid, and they were loading them onto the truck. And one of our elders who was there helping counted the chairs. And they had pre-packaged, instead of 60, we had 2 boxes, and the crates came of 32 each. So we actually ended up with 64 chairs. And the employees had not noticed. They didn't know we were getting 4 free chairs. They had no idea. Would it have been, okay for us to get some extra chairs for the church? Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But we took the time to say, hey, wait a minute. We only paid for 60. There's 4 more. And you would not believe how astonished these Sam's Duck employees were. They could not believe that we were that honest to not steal 4 chairs. They could not believe it. Apparently, most people would have taken the free chairs and ran. They could not believe that we would go out of our way. I had to go back inside to the front desk and pay for 4 extra chairs. at a higher rate than the original bulk price. Because we didn't want to unpack them all, they'd fall out on the road. And they could not believe that we've been that honest. And honestly, that should be the norm. They should assume and understand that people are going to do the right thing. But that's not what our world is like. God hears the cries of these oppressed harvesters, those without sneakiness, those without insensitivity, those without collections or toughness to find comfort in. God hears the honest person. God hears the suffering of those who live as targets and are therefore caused to depend on God. That's who God's listening to. That's what God's listening for, to hear if you're depending on Him or on your stuff, depending on Him or on your strength. So as we wrap up, how does this change us? What does this do? What does this say to us? How can we stand up under judgment if our stuff and our insensitivity don't help? Who's God listening to? The righteous person and the innocent person. So we need to become righteous and we need to become innocent. You need to trust God to fight your battles instead of your toughness. You need to trust God to take care of you instead of your Acorn collection. God is referred to by James here as the Lord of hosts. What does that mean? What's a Lord? That's a ruler. What are hosts? Bunches and bunches of people. God is referred to here as the Lord of hosts, meaning He's the one with the most resources. There's no need for you to collect stuff. There's no need for you to bully other people. You need to trust God, this Lord of hosts, to fight for you. Old Testament and New Testament, we have all these examples of how willing, able, ready God is to fight for His people. He proves it over and over again. And today you need to find the best proof. The best proof in the fact that He used the incredible resource of His Son Jesus Christ and the limitless wealth of Jesus' love to get you out of the judgment that you have to face. The incredible resource of Jesus Christ and the limitless wealth of Jesus' love so that you can stand up under that judgment. You don't have to say, God, let me in because I've got a bunch of DVDs. God, let me in because I was tougher than anybody else in the church. You can say, God, let me in because your Son Jesus died for me. God, let me stay near to you because I'm washed in your Son's blood. We read in that vineyard parable that people come to Christ at different times. The beginning of the day, the end of the day. That's an analogy for the start of life, those who find Christ young, and the end of life. Those who find Christ when they're in their old age, the 11th hour. And then there's all those hours in between. Because people come to Jesus in different days, but they in different times, but they all in that parable receive the same reward. No matter how long you've been collecting, no matter how long you've been bullying your way to comfort, it is never too late to come now. Never too late to listen up. To start serving God instead of yourself. So start today. Trust Jesus to be your comfort. Trust Jesus to fight for your safety from judgment that you need the most.